Robert Henderson stared at the brown stain spreading across his living room ceiling. It looked like a map of some unknown country, growing larger with each passing day. Every time it rained, the stain got bigger, and the weather forecast said more rain was coming. He was 72 years old, living alone in a house that felt too big and too empty. His wife Margaret had passed away 3 years ago, and since then everything seemed to fall apart. First it was the hot water heater. Then the dishwasher stopped working. Now the roof was leaking, and this time he couldn't ignore it. Robert picked up his phone and started calling. The first roofing company said they could come in 4 weeks. 4 weeks! The second company said 3 weeks, maybe sooner if someone canceled. The third company didn't even answer. He left a message and waited. Nobody called back. By the end of the week, he had called every roofing company listed in the phone book. The answers were all the same. Everyone was busy. Everyone was booked. And everyone was expensive. The cheapest quote he got was $4,000. The most expensive was almost $7,000. Robert sat at his kitchen table and looked at his bank statements. His Social Security check covered the basics, but not much more. He had some savings, but he was saving that for emergencies. Was this an emergency? He wasn't sure. The leak was getting worse, but the house wasn't falling down. Not yet, anyway. He thought about asking his son for help, but David lived 3 states away with his own family and his own problems. They talked once a month, usually on Sundays. It was enough. Robert didn't want to be a burden. That Tuesday morning, Robert drove to the local diner for breakfast. He went there twice a week, always ordered the same thing. 2 eggs, toast coffee, black, no sugar. The waitress, Linda, knew his order by heart. "Morning, Robert," she said, pouring his coffee before he even sat down. "Morning, Linda." The diner was quiet, just a few regulars scattered around. Robert liked it that way. He sat in his usual booth by the window and watched the street. A truck drove by. A woman walked her dog. Normal Tuesday morning stuff. Linda brought his eggs and lingered by the table. "You hear about the Johnsons' place?" she asked. "No, what happened?" "Roof caved in during that storm last week. Nobody got hurt, thank God, but the whole back bedroom is destroyed. They're staying with their daughter now." Robert's stomach tightened. That could be him. That brown stain on his ceiling could turn into a cave-in. He thought about sleeping in his bedroom right under that leak, and suddenly his eggs didn't look so appealing. "That's terrible," he said quietly. Linda nodded. "Yeah. They're trying to find someone to fix it, but you know how it is. Everyone's backed up for weeks." At the next table, 2 men were talking about the same thing. Roofing companies. Wait times. Prices going up. Seems like Robert wasn't the only one with problems. He finished his breakfast and was about to leave when he heard Linda talking to another customer at the counter. A younger guy, maybe 30, wearing a dusty jacket. "Any luck today?" Linda asked him. "Not yet," the man said. His voice was quiet, tired. "I've been asking around, but nobody needs help." "You try the hardware store?" "Yeah. They said they'd keep me in mind if something came up." Robert paid his bill but stayed near the door, pretending to look at the community bulletin board. He wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but he couldn't help hearing. "What kind of work are you looking for?" Linda asked. "Anything, really. I can do yard work, painting, moving stuff. I'm not picky. I just need something to bring home to my family." There was something in the man's voice. Not desperation exactly, but honest need. Robert glanced over. The man had dark hair, dark eyes, and looked like he hadn't slept well in a while. But there was something else too, pride. He wasn't begging. He was working for it. Linda poured him a coffee. "This one's on the house," she said softly. "I can pay," the man said. "I know you can. But today it's on the house." Robert walked out to his truck, but he couldn't stop thinking about what he'd heard. A man looking for work. Any kind of work. Robert needed work done. Maybe not professional work, but work nonetheless. He sat in his truck for a few minutes, engine running, thinking it through. This was crazy. You don't hire someone off the street to fix your roof. That's not how things work. You hire professionals. Licensed people, insured people, but professionals cost $4,000. And they couldn't come for 3 weeks. And that stain on his ceiling wasn't getting any smaller. Robert turned off his truck and walked back into the diner. The man was still sitting at the counter, slowly drinking his coffee, making it last. Robert approached carefully. "Excuse me," Robert said. I couldn't help overhearing. "You're looking for work?" The man turned. Up close, Robert could see the tiredness in his eyes, but also the intelligence. This wasn't someone who'd given up. This was someone who was fighting. "Yes, sir," the man said. "I am. What's your name?" "Daniel. Daniel Blackwater." "I'm Robert Henderson." They shook hands. Daniel's grip was firm, calloused. "Working hands? What kind of work have you done before?" "I worked construction for 6 years. Mostly framing, some concrete work. I got laid off about 6 months ago when the company downsized. Been picking up odd jobs where I can since then." "You ever work on roofs?" Daniel hesitated. Robert appreciated the honesty in that hesitation. A lot of people would have just said yes. "Not professionally," Daniel admitted, "but I helped my grandfather build and repair houses on the reservation when I was growing up. Traditional methods, but solid. I learn fast and I'm not afraid of hard work." Robert made a decision. Maybe it was the desperation. Maybe it was the fact that Daniel reminded him of himself 50 years ago, young and struggling and willing to work for a chance. Maybe it was just that brown stain on his ceiling getting bigger every day. "My roof's leaking," Robert said. "I need it fixed, but all the roofing companies are booked for weeks and they want more money than I can comfortably spend. If you're willing to learn as you go, I'm willing to take a chance. I'll pay you fair and I'll pay you daily so you're not waiting around for your money." Daniel's eyes widened slightly. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. But I need to know you'll stick with it until the job's done. And I need to know you'll tell me if something's beyond your skill level." "I will," Daniel said quickly. "I promise I will. And sir, I really appreciate this. My wife and kids, we've been struggling and this means more than you know." "Be at my house tomorrow morning at 7, Robert said, writing his address on a napkin. "Bring whatever tools you have. We'll figure out what else we need as we go." As Robert drove home, he wondered if he'd just made a smart decision or a stupid one. He didn't know Daniel. Didn't know if he could actually fix a roof. Didn't know if he'd even show up tomorrow morning. But something told him it would work out. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was faith. Or maybe it was just the fact that two people who needed each other had found each other at exactly the right time. Either way, tomorrow morning would tell. Robert didn't sleep well that night. He kept thinking about the decision he'd made. Hiring a stranger to fix his roof. A stranger who'd admitted he'd never done professional roofing work. What if Daniel didn't show up? What if he did show up but made things worse? What if he fell off the roof and got hurt? By 6 in the morning, Robert was already up, making coffee and looking out the window every few minutes. The sun was just starting to come up, painting the sky orange and pink. It was going to be a hot day. At exactly 7 o'clock, an old pickup truck pulled into his driveway. Robert felt a wave of relief. Daniel had shown up. The young man climbed out of his truck carrying a worn toolbox and an aluminum ladder that had seen better days. He was wearing jeans, work boots, and a faded blue t-shirt. He looked nervous but determined. "Morning," Daniel called out as Robert opened the front door. "Morning. You're right on time." "I'm always on time," Daniel said with a small smile. "My grandfather used to say that being late is the same as lying." Both show disrespect. Robert liked that. He led Daniel around the house to show him the problem area. From the outside, you could see where some shingles were missing. The wood underneath looked dark and damaged. "That doesn't look good," Daniel said, studying the roof carefully. "But I think it's fixable. The structure looks solid. It's mainly surface damage and water rot in that one section." "How can you tell?" Robert asked. "See how the rest of the roof line is straight? If there was serious structural damage, you'd see sagging or dips. This is more localized. We'll need to replace the bad wood, seal it properly, and put new shingles on. It's going to take some time, but it's doable." Robert was impressed. Daniel might not have professional credentials, but he clearly knew how to assess a problem. They spent the next hour making a list of materials they'd need. Then they drove to the hardware store together. At the store, Robert noticed how Daniel carefully checked every item, looking for the best quality at the best price. He wasn't just grabbing things randomly. He was thinking it through. "This sealant is cheaper," Robert pointed out, holding up a different brand. "Yeah, but it won't last as long," Daniel explained. "This one costs $5 more, but it's better quality. You're paying me to fix your roof, not to fix it again in 2 years." They loaded everything into Robert's truck and headed back. By the time they got the ladder set up and Daniel climbed onto the roof, it was almost 10 o'clock. The sun was getting hot. Robert watched from below as Daniel carefully removed the damaged shingles. He worked slowly, methodically, examining each section before moving to the next. There was no wasted movement, no rushing, just steady, focused work. Around noon, Robert called up to him. "Time for lunch. Come on down." Daniel climbed down, wiping sweat from his face. His shirt was soaked through. Robert had made sandwiches and put out a pitcher of cold lemonade. They sat on the back porch in the shade. For a few minutes, they ate in silence. Then Robert asked, "You said you have kids?" Daniel nodded, his face softening. "Two, a boy and a girl. Tommy just turned 6 and little Amy is 4. They're the reason I keep going, you know. When I lost my job, I thought I could find something else quick. Construction work is always needed, right? But then the economy slowed down and everyone was cutting back. I sent out dozens of applications, went to every job site I could find, nothing. That must have been hard. The hardest part was watching my wife, Maria, try to make meals stretch. She'd tell the kids she wasn't hungry so they could eat more. She thought I didn't notice, but I did." Daniel's voice got quiet. "A man's supposed to provide for his family. That's what my father taught me. And there I was, unable to put food on the table." Robert understood that feeling more than Daniel knew. After Margaret died, Robert had felt useless, like he'd lost his purpose. "Different situation, same empty feeling. You're providing now," Robert said. "You showed up, you're doing good work, and you're earning honest money. That's what matters." Daniel looked at him with gratitude. "Thank you for giving me this chance. Most people, they see where I'm from and they make assumptions. They think I'm looking for a handout or that I'm not reliable. Where you're from doesn't matter to me," Robert said simply. "What matters is the work you do and the person you are." They finished lunch and Daniel went back up on the roof. Robert stayed below, watching and occasionally handing up tools or materials. As the afternoon wore on, he could see real progress. The damaged section was being carefully removed and replaced. Around 4 o'clock, Daniel came down again. His hands were covered in small cuts and his face was red from the sun. "I need to stop for today," he said. "I've got the worst of the damage removed and I've started laying the new wood. Tomorrow I can finish the wood replacement and start on the weatherproofing." "Sounds good," Robert said. He pulled out his wallet and counted out the day's wages. They'd agreed on $15 an hour, and Daniel had worked 7 solid hours with just 1 lunch break. Robert counted out $120, then added an extra 20. "That's too much," Daniel protested. "It's hot work and you did it well. Take it." Daniel hesitated, then accepted the money. "Thank you. This is going to make a real difference tonight." As Daniel packed up his tools, Robert found himself not wanting the younger man to leave. The house felt less empty when someone else was around. "Less lonely. Same time tomorrow?" Robert asked. "I'll be here." After Daniel left, Robert went inside and made himself dinner. The house was quiet again, but somehow it felt different. There was a sense of purpose now. Tomorrow Daniel would come back. Work would continue. Progress would be made. He walked into the living room and looked up at the ceiling. The stain was still there, but now he knew it was being fixed. It wasn't just a growing problem anymore. It was a problem being solved. That night, Robert slept better, and when morning came, he found himself actually looking forward to the day. He made extra coffee and even scrambled some eggs for both of them. When Daniel's truck pulled up at 7, Robert had breakfast waiting on the porch. Daniel looked surprised. "You didn't have to do this." "I know, but I did anyway. Sit down and eat. You're going to need your energy today." They ate together as the sun came up, and Robert realized something. This arrangement wasn't just about fixing a roof anymore. It was about 2 people connecting. 2 people who needed something the other could provide. Robert needed help with his house. Daniel needed work and respect and a chance to prove himself. But more than that, Robert needed someone to talk to. Someone to share meals with. Someone to make the house feel less empty. And maybe Daniel needed someone to believe in him when nobody else would. It was turning into something neither of them had expected. Something good. As they finished breakfast and Daniel headed back up to the roof, Robert felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt useful again. He felt like he mattered. And up on the roof, Daniel worked with renewed energy, knowing that someone was counting on him. Someone believed he could do this. And he wasn't going to let Robert down. The work continued, and so did something more important. A friendship was beginning to form. By the 3rd day, they had fallen into a comfortable rhythm. Daniel would arrive at 7, Robert would have coffee ready, and they'd spend a few minutes talking before the work began. It was the small moments that Robert had missed most since Margaret passed away. The simple act of sharing morning coffee with another person, having someone to talk to. The roof work was progressing steadily. Daniel had replaced all the damaged wood and was now working on the waterproofing layer. He moved carefully, checking and double-checking every section. Robert noticed that Daniel treated the house like it was his own. There was pride in his work. On Thursday morning, Robert climbed up the ladder to see the progress for himself. His knees weren't what they used to be, but curiosity got the better of him. Daniel helped him onto the roof, making sure he was steady. "Be careful up here," Daniel warned. "The surface is slippery in some spots." From up on the roof, Robert could see his whole neighborhood. Mrs. Patterson's house 2 doors down. The old Miller place that had been empty for years. The park where he used to take his grandkids when they visited. Everything looked different from up high. "You do this every day?" Robert asked, slightly out of breath. Daniel smiled. "You get used to it. My grandfather used to say that working up high teaches you respect. Respect for the height, respect for the materials, respect for the work itself. One mistake up here can be serious." They sat together for a moment, looking out over the neighborhood. Robert pointed to different houses, sharing stories about the families who lived there. The Johnsons, who had the cave-in. The Kramers, who'd lived there 40 years. The new family with 3 kids who'd just moved in last month. "You've been here a long time," Daniel observed. 35 years in this house. Bought it when my son was just a baby." Margaret picked it out. She loved the big backyard and the porch. Said it was a house for making memories. Robert's voice got quieter. "We made a lot of good memories here." Daniel didn't say anything, but his silence was respectful. He understood loss. They sat there a few more minutes before carefully making their way back down. During lunch that day, Daniel started opening up more about his own life. He told Robert about growing up on the reservation, about his grandfather who'd taught him traditional building methods. "Grandfather didn't believe in shortcuts," Daniel said. He'd say, "If you're going to do something, do it right the first time. The land remembers lazy work." I didn't always understand what he meant back then, but I do now. Sounds like a wise man. He was. He passed away 5 years ago. I wish my kids could have known him better. Tommy barely remembers him and Amy never met him. Robert got an idea. "Why don't you bring them by sometime?" "Your wife and kids? I'd like to meet them." Daniel looked surprised. "You sure? They can be pretty energetic. Tommy's at that age where he's into everything. This house could use some energy. It's been too quiet for too long." That Saturday, Daniel brought his family. Maria was a petite woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. She carried a container of homemade tamales as a thank you gift. Tommy was a whirlwind of excitement, immediately asking to see the roof and the tools. Little Amy was shy, hiding behind her mother's legs. Robert led them inside, suddenly self-conscious about the state of his house. He'd cleaned up, but it still looked like what it was. An old man's house with outdated furniture and faded photographs everywhere. Maria noticed the pictures. "Is this your family?" "That's my wife, Margaret. And that's our son, David, with his kids. They live in California now." "She was beautiful," Maria said softly, looking at a wedding photo. She was, inside and out. While the adults talked in the living room, Tommy had found his way to Robert's garage where he kept his old tools. Robert followed him out, expecting to have to stop the boy from touching things. But Tommy was surprisingly careful, examining each tool with wide eyes. "My dad has tools like these," Tommy said, "but his are older." "These are pretty old too," Robert chuckled. "Some of them I've had since before your dad was born." "Really? That's forever." Robert showed Tommy how some of the tools worked, and the boy listened with intense focus. Amy eventually wandered out too, less interested in the tools but fascinated by an old bicycle hanging on the wall. "That was my son's bike," Robert explained. "I keep meaning to donate it, but I never get around to it." "It's pretty," Amy said quietly, her shyness melting away a bit. Inside, Maria and Daniel were sitting at Robert's kitchen table. Maria looked around with appreciation. "You have a lovely home." "It needs work," Robert admitted. "More than just the roof. But one thing at a time." "Daniel says you've been very kind to him," Maria said. "Paying him daily, feeding him lunch. That means everything to us. Your husband's a good worker. Honest, reliable." "That's rare these days," Maria's eyes welled up a bit. "These past 6 months have been the hardest of our lives. There were days I didn't know how we'd make it. And then Daniel met you, and it felt like someone finally answered our prayers." Robert felt a lump in his throat. He understood exactly what she meant. Because Daniel and his family had answered his prayers too. even if he hadn't realized he was praying. They all had lunch together, the tamales Maria brought and sandwiches Robert had made. The house filled with laughter and conversation, with Tommy's excited chatter and Amy's giggles. It was the most alive the house had felt in 3 years. After they left, Robert sat in his living room, listening to the silence. But it was different now. It wasn't the heavy, oppressive silence of loneliness. It was peaceful, content. The house felt warm, like it had been blessed by the presence of family. On Monday, when Daniel returned to work, something had shifted between them. They weren't just a homeowner and a worker anymore. They were becoming friends. Maria really enjoyed Saturday, Daniel said as he prepared his materials for the day. She hasn't relaxed like that in months. Thank you for inviting us. Thank you for coming. And thank Maria for the tamales. Best I've ever had. She'll be happy to hear that. She was nervous about bringing them, worried they weren't fancy enough. They were perfect. As the week continued, their conversations grew deeper. Daniel told Robert about his dreams of starting his own business someday, maybe a handyman service or small construction company. Robert shared stories about his own career, the ups and downs, the lessons learned. The biggest mistake people make, Robert said one afternoon, is thinking success happens overnight. It doesn't. It's built day by day, job by job, one good decision at a time. Daniel absorbed this wisdom like a sponge. He'd ask questions, and Robert would answer with the benefit of his 72 years of experience. They talked about business, about family, about life. By Friday of that week, the roof was nearly complete. Just the final layer of shingles needed to be laid. Daniel had done exceptional work. The repair was solid, professional-looking, and thorough. That evening, as Daniel packed up his tools, he turned to Robert with a serious expression. "I want you to know something," Daniel said. "This job, it saved my family. But more than that, you treated me with respect when most people wouldn't give me a second look. You trusted me. You believed in me. That means more than the money." Robert felt emotion rising in his chest. "You earned that respect, and you've given me something too. You've reminded me that life isn't over just because you get old or because you lose someone. There's still purpose, still connection." They shook hands, but it felt like more than that. It felt like the beginning of something important. Neither of them knew it yet, but this roofing job was changing both their lives in ways they never expected. The roof should have been finished in 2 weeks, but Robert kept finding other small projects around the house. A loose board on the deck, a fence post that was leaning, the gutter that wasn't draining properly. Each time Daniel finished one job, Robert would mention something else that needed attention. Daniel never complained. In fact, he seemed grateful for the continued work. And Robert, if he was being honest with himself, wasn't ready for the daily visits to end. One morning, about 3 weeks into their arrangement, Robert was showing Daniel the problem with the back porch steps. As Daniel knelt down to examine the rotted wood, he suddenly went very still. "You okay?" Robert asked. Daniel stood up slowly, a strange expression on his face. "Mr. Henderson, when was the last time you were under your porch?" "Under it? I don't know. Years probably. Why?" "There's something wedged up in the rafters. Looks like a metal box of some kind." Robert's heart skipped. "A box?" "Yeah, it's pretty far back, but I can see it." "Want me to get it out?" 20 minutes later, Daniel emerged from under the porch, cobwebs in his hair, holding a rusty metal box about the size of a shoebox. It was locked with an old padlock. Robert's hands trembled as he took it. He recognized the box immediately. It had been Margaret's. She'd kept letters and private things in it. But he'd thought it was lost years ago. He'd looked for it after she passed, wanting to find her old letters. But he'd assumed she'd thrown it away or donated it. "I'll give you some privacy," Daniel said quietly, heading back to work on the porch. Robert carried the box inside and sat at the kitchen table. The padlock was rusted but still secure. He searched through Margaret's old belongings until he found a small key ring he'd kept. Third key. The lock clicked open. Inside were dozens of letters, photographs he'd never seen, and a journal. Margaret's journal. He opened it with shaking hands and began to read. The entries dated back to when they first got married. She wrote about her hopes and dreams, her fears, her love for him. Some entries made him laugh. Some made him cry. She'd written about their son being born, about buying this house, about ordinary days that had meant everything to her. One entry, dated just a few months before she died, hit him hard. Robert thinks I don't see his sadness, but I do. He's worried about what will happen to me. He's worried about growing old alone. I wish I could promise him he'll be okay, but I can't. All I can do is love him with everything I have for as long as I have. And I hope that somehow, even after I'm gone, he'll find purpose again. He'll find joy again. He's too good a man to spend his remaining years alone and sad. Robert closed the journal and wiped his eyes. He sat there for a long time holding the book, feeling Margaret's presence in a way he hadn't since she died. When he finally went back outside, Daniel was working on the porch steps, carefully measuring and cutting new boards. He looked up when Robert approached. "You all right?" Daniel asked gently. "Yeah," Robert said, his voice thick. "Yeah, I am. That box, it was my wife's. Full of letters and a journal I never knew existed. Reading her words, it's like getting to talk to her again." Daniel set down his tools. "I'm glad I found it then. So am I." Robert paused, then made a decision. "You and your family, why don't you come over for dinner tomorrow?" "A real dinner?" "I'll cook," Daniel smiled. "You don't have to do that. I want to. Besides, this house needs to hear children laughing again." The next evening, Robert cooked for the first time in months. Not just heating up frozen meals or making sandwiches, but really cooking. Pot roast with potatoes and carrots the way Margaret used to make it. He even baked rolls from scratch. When Daniel's family arrived, Tommy and Amy ran straight to the backyard, where Robert had set up his son's old swing set that had been sitting unused for years. Their laughter filled the evening air. Over dinner, the conversation flowed easily. Maria told stories about her grandmother, who'd raised her after her parents died. Daniel talked about his hopes for the future. Robert shared memories of Margaret, and for the first time, talking about her didn't hurt quite so much. "She would have liked you all," Robert said. Margaret loved having people around. She was always inviting neighbors over, hosting dinners. After she got sick, the house got quieter. And after she passed, it felt like the silence would never end. "It doesn't have to be silent," Maria said softly. "You're always welcome to visit us too." After dinner, while Maria helped with the dishes despite Robert's protests, Daniel noticed a photo on the mantel. It showed a younger Robert with tools standing in front of a workshop. "You had a workshop?" Daniel asked. "Still do. It's in the garage, though I haven't used it much lately. I used to do woodworking. Made furniture, cabinets, little toys for my grandkids, and could I see it?" Robert led him to the garage. Under dust covers and years of neglect was a complete woodworking setup. A table saw, a lathe, hand tools organized on the walls. Everything a craftsman could need. Daniel's eyes went wide. "This is incredible." "It's been sitting unused for too long," Robert said. "You know, if you ever needed to use it, you're welcome to. Seems a shame to let good tools go to waste." "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. In fact, I was thinking, you're good with your hands and you learn fast. What if I taught you some woodworking? It could help you expand what you can offer to clients. Carpentry, furniture repair, custom work. There's money in that." Daniel looked overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll come by on weekends. We'll work on some projects together. I'll teach you what I know and we'll build up your skills." That night after Daniel's family left, Robert sat in his living room with Margaret's journal. He opened to a random page and read, "The best way to honor a life is to live yours fully. Don't just exist, Robert. Live, connect with people. Make a difference. Find purpose," he smiled. Margaret would have approved of Daniel and his family. She would have encouraged this friendship. She would have told Robert to stop hiding in his grief and start living again, and that's exactly what he was going to do. Over the next few weeks, a pattern developed. Daniel worked on various projects around Robert's house during weekdays. On Saturday mornings, they'd work in the garage together, Robert teaching Daniel woodworking techniques. Maria started bringing traditional Apache dishes to share, and Robert would cook his own specialties in return. Tommy and Amy became regular fixtures at the house. Robert taught Tommy how to use basic tools safely, and Amy loved helping in the garden, planting flowers and vegetables. The house transformed from a lonely, silent place into a home filled with life and laughter. Robert's neighbors started noticing the change. Mrs. Patterson commented on how good the house looked. The Kramers mentioned how nice it was to hear children playing in the backyard again. Even the mailman remarked that Robert seemed happier. "You've got a glow about you," Linda from the diner said one morning. "That handyman working out okay?" "Better than okay," Robert replied. Turns out I didn't just need my roof fixed. I needed a reason to get up in the morning. One evening, about 6 weeks after they'd first met, Robert and Daniel sat on the newly repaired porch watching the sunset. The house was completely fixed now. Every project was done. The roof was solid, the porch was steady, the fence stood straight. I guess that's everything, Daniel said quietly. I guess so, Robert agreed, feeling a sadness settle over him. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Daniel spoke. Unless you wanted to help me with something else. What's that? I've been thinking about what you said. Starting my own business. I have the skills now, thanks to you, but I don't know the first thing about running a business. Marketing, pricing, managing money. I could use a mentor. Robert felt hope bloom in his chest. I think I could help with that. Their partnership wasn't ending. It was just beginning. Starting a business turned out to be more complicated than either of them had imagined. Robert helped Daniel create a simple business plan at the kitchen table. They spent hours talking about pricing, how to find customers, what tools to invest in, how to manage money properly. First thing you need is a name, Robert said, pulling out a notepad. Something professional but personal. Something that tells people who you are. Daniel thought for a moment. What about Blackwater Home Services? Simple. Uses my name, tells people what I do. I like it. Professional but not fancy. People will remember it. They made a list of services Daniel could offer. Basic carpentry, painting, roof repairs, fence building, deck maintenance, small remodeling jobs. The list grew as they talked. You're going to need business cards, Robert said, and maybe some flyers to put up around town. People need to know you exist. All of that costs money, Daniel said worriedly. Money I don't really have right now. Robert was quiet for a moment. He'd been thinking about this. He had Margaret's savings sitting in an account, untouched since she passed. Money they'd saved together for retirement, for emergencies, for someday. But someday had never come for Margaret. He'd been too grief-stricken to use it, feeling like spending it would be betraying her memory somehow. But reading her journal had changed something in him. Margaret would have wanted that money to help someone. She would have loved seeing it give a struggling family a chance. I want to invest in your business, Robert said. Daniel looked up sharply. What? The startup costs. Business cards, tools, maybe a small truck that actually runs reliably. I want to help. Mr. Henderson, I can't accept that. You've already done too much. Listen to me, Robert said firmly. My wife and I saved that money for something meaningful. This is meaningful. You're not taking charity. Consider it an investment. When your business takes off, you can pay me back. Fair? Daniel's eyes were shining. I don't know what to say. Say you'll build something good. Say you'll treat your customers right. Say you'll make me proud. I will. I promise I will. Over the next week, they worked on setting everything up. Robert helped Daniel design simple business cards. They drove to the print shop together and ordered 500 cards. They went to the hardware store and bought professional-grade tools, the kind that would last years. Robert even helped Daniel set up a basic bank account for the business. The money came from Margaret's savings, and every dollar spent felt right. Robert could almost hear her approval, feel her encouragement. This was exactly what she would have wanted. They made flyers advertising Daniel's services and spent a Saturday morning putting them up around town. The grocery store bulletin board, the library, the community center, local coffee shops, anywhere people might see them. Robert introduced Daniel to everyone he knew, his neighbors, the folks at the diner, the people at his church. Word started spreading slowly but surely, the Apache man who did good work for fair prices, the one Robert Henderson was personally vouching for. The first call came 3 days later. Mrs. Patterson needed her deck stained. It was a small job, but Daniel approached it like it was the most important project in the world. He showed up on time, worked carefully, and finished exactly when he said he would. The deck looked beautiful. Mrs. Patterson was so pleased that she told her sister. Her sister told a friend. That friend told a neighbor, and just like that, Daniel's phone started ringing more often. A fence repair here, a bathroom cabinet there, painting someone's living room. Small jobs, but they added up. Daniel was working 6 days a week now, coming to Robert's house on Sundays to talk about the business, to ask advice, to plan the next week. Maria couldn't believe how things had turned around. It's like a miracle, she told Robert one Sunday when the whole family came for dinner. 2 months ago, we didn't know how we'd pay next month's rent. Now Daniel's turning down jobs because he's too busy. It's not a miracle, Robert said. It's hard work and people recognizing quality when they see it. But he felt like it was a bit miraculous, too. How one chance encounter in a diner had changed everything. How hiring a stranger to fix his roof had turned into this. Tommy and Amy were thriving, too. With money coming in regularly, they were eating better. Maria had bought them new shoes and school supplies. The stress that had marked their young faces was fading, replaced by the carefree happiness that children should have. One evening, about 3 months after they'd met, Daniel came to Robert's house with a serious expression. He sat down at the kitchen table and pulled out an envelope. "What's this?" Robert asked. "Open it." Inside was a check, made out to Robert. "For $2,000, Daniel, this is too much. We agreed you'd pay me back slowly." "That's just the first payment," Daniel said. "Business has been good. Really good. Better than I ever imagined. And I know I couldn't have done any of this without you. The money, the advice, the connections, the belief in me when nobody else did. So I'm paying you back just like I promised." Robert felt emotion welling up. "I'm proud of you. You know that? I wouldn't be here without you." "Yes, you would. You've got the talent and the work ethic. I just gave you an opportunity. You did the rest." They talked late into the night, making plans. Daniel wanted to hire help. He was getting more work than he could handle alone. Robert advised him to be careful, to hire slowly, to find people he could trust. "Remember," Robert said, "you're not just building a business. You're building a reputation. Every job you do, every person you work with, they're telling other people about you, good or bad." "I learned that from watching you," Daniel said. "The way you treat people, the way you keep your word. That's the kind of businessman I want to be." As summer turned to fall, Blackwater Home Services continued to grow. Daniel hired 2 helpers, both young men from the reservation who needed work. He trained them the same way Robert had trained him. With patience, with high standards, with respect, Robert had become like a grandfather to Tommy and Amy. They came over after school sometimes, doing homework at his kitchen table, eating snacks, telling him about their day. The house that had been so silent and empty was now full of life and noise and joy. One Saturday afternoon, Robert was in the garage workshop with Daniel, teaching him how to build a custom bookshelf for a client, when Tommy came running in. "Grandpa Robert," he called out. He'd started calling Robert that a few weeks ago, and it made Robert's heart swell every time. "What's up, buddy? Mom says dinner's ready. She made your favorite." They all sat around Robert's dining table, the one that had been set for one person for so long. Now it was crowded with Daniel's family, with laughter and conversation and the clinking of dishes being passed around. Robert looked around the table and felt a peace he hadn't experienced since Margaret died. This was family. Maybe not by blood, but by choice, by circumstance, by love. That night, after everyone had gone home, Robert opened Margaret's journal to the last entry she'd written. "I'm not afraid of dying," she'd written. "I'm afraid of leaving Robert alone. He'll need people around him. He'll need purpose. He'll need to remember that life is about connection and love and helping others. That's what makes everything worthwhile. I hope he finds that again." Robert closed the journal and smiled. "I found it, Margaret," he whispered. "I found it." Outside, the stars were shining bright. Inside, the house felt warm and full of possibility. And Robert Henderson, at 72 years old, felt like his life was just beginning again. Word traveled fast in a small town. By November, everyone knew about Daniel Blackwater and his growing handyman business. But more than that, they knew about the unusual friendship between the elderly widower and the young Apache man who'd started out as his roofer. People noticed how Robert's house looked alive again. The lawn was neatly trimmed. The porch had fresh paint. Christmas lights went up early that year, something Robert hadn't done since Margaret passed. Neighbors would see Tommy and Amy playing in the yard, hear their laughter carrying down the street. At the diner one morning, Linda poured Robert his usual coffee and sat down across from him. "You look different," she said. "Different how?" "Happier, lighter, like you lost 10 years somewhere." Robert smiled. "I feel lighter. Turns out hiring Daniel to fix my roof was the best decision I've made in a long time. I heard his business is doing real well. Better than well. He's got more work than he can handle. Had to hire 2 guys to help him, and he's thinking about hiring a 3rd. Linda shook her head in amazement. When I saw him sitting at that counter 6 months ago looking for any kind of work, I never imagined it would turn into this. Sometimes people just need a chance, Robert said. That's all. One chance to prove what they can do. The conversation at the diner spread, as conversations in small towns do. People started talking about giving local workers a chance, about looking beyond first impressions, about how a simple act of kindness had transformed 2 lives and was now affecting the whole community. The Kramers hired Daniel to renovate their kitchen. The Johnsons, whose roof had caved in, hired him to rebuild their damaged bedroom. The new family with 3 kids hired him to build a treehouse in their backyard. Job after job came in, each one leading to another recommendation. But Daniel never forgot where he came from. Every week he'd set aside time for small jobs that elderly people needed done. Changing light bulbs they couldn't reach, fixing loose steps, repairing screen doors. He charged them next to nothing, sometimes refusing payment altogether. "Why do you do that?" one of his workers asked. "You could be making real money on those hours." "Because someone gave me a chance when I had nothing," Daniel explained. "Because Mr. Henderson didn't just hire me, he believed in me. Now I have the chance to help others. That's more important than money." Robert heard about this from Mrs. Patterson, who'd had Daniel fix her front steps for almost nothing. She came over to Robert's house specifically to tell him. "That young man is something special," she said. "He wouldn't even let me pay him the full amount. Said elderly folks on fixed incomes get a discount. We need more people like him in this world." Robert felt proud hearing this. Not because he took credit for Daniel's character, that was all Daniel, but because he'd been part of helping that character shine through. One evening in late November, there was a knock on Robert's door. He opened it to find 5 of his neighbors standing there, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Can we come in?" asked Bill from across the street. "Of course. What's going on?" They settled in his living room, and Bill spoke for the group. "We've been talking, those of us on the block, and we wanted to say something to you. What you did for Daniel, giving him a chance, helping him start his business, it's affected all of us." "I don't understand," Robert said. Mrs. Patterson jumped in. "You showed us that we'd been too quick to judge, too quick to overlook people who didn't fit our expectations. Daniel's not the only one who needed help. There are others out there, good people who just need someone to believe in them. So we want to start something," Bill continued, "a community program, where we connect people who need work with people who need work done. Nothing fancy, just a list at the community center. And we want to name it after you and Daniel, the Henderson Blackwater Community Program." Robert was stunned. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll help us organize it," said another neighbor. "You and Daniel both." When Robert told Daniel about the proposal later that evening, the younger man was equally amazed. "A program named after us? That's incredible." "It's really named after you," Robert said. "You're the one who showed everyone what giving someone a chance can lead to." We showed them together. They worked with the neighbors to set up the program. It started simple. A bulletin board at the community center where people could post if they needed work, or if they had work to offer. Maria volunteered to manage it, checking the board daily, making connections between people who needed each other. The program grew faster than anyone expected. Within a month, 15 people had found work through the community board. A retired teacher started tutoring kids who were struggling in school. A young single mother found part-time bookkeeping work she could do from home. An elderly man who'd been a mechanic his whole life started fixing cars in his garage for people who couldn't afford shop prices. The local newspaper did a story about it. "Community Program Transforms Lives," the headline read. The article featured Daniel's story prominently, talking about how one man's willingness to take a chance had started a chain reaction of goodwill throughout the town. After the article came out, Daniel's phone wouldn't stop ringing. People from neighboring towns wanted to hire him. Businesses wanted him to do commercial work. The money was good, really good, but Daniel was careful not to lose himself in the success. "Remember what's important," Robert reminded him one Sunday over dinner. "It's not about getting rich. It's about doing good work and helping people. The money will come if you stay focused on that." "I know," Daniel said. "It's just hard sometimes. I see all this money being offered, and I think about everything my family went through. I want to make sure we never go through that again." "You won't," Maria said softly, putting her hand on his. "We're stable now. We have savings. We have security. Don't lose sight of who you are chasing after more." The holiday season arrived and Robert's house became the gathering place for celebrations. Thanksgiving dinner filled his dining table with Daniel's family, several neighbors, and even Linda from the diner, who didn't have family nearby. The house rang with laughter and conversation, with the sound of children playing and adults sharing stories. Robert stood in his kitchen, looking out at all the people, and felt Margaret's presence strongly. This was what she'd wanted. This was what she'd written about in her journal. Connection, community, purpose, love. Tommy ran up to him, pulling on his sleeve. "Grandpa Robert, can we put up the Christmas tree this weekend?" "We sure can, buddy. And can I help decorate it?" "You and Amy both. I wouldn't have it any other way." That Christmas was the first one in 3 years that Robert didn't spend alone. Daniel's family came over Christmas morning. They'd bought him presents which embarrassed and touched him deeply. A new sweater from Maria, a drawing from Amy, a handmade toolbox from Tommy built with Daniel's help in the workshop. Robert gave Tommy and Amy savings bonds for their future education. He gave Maria a beautiful set of cooking pots she'd been eyeing in the store. And he gave Daniel something more meaningful than any physical gift. "I'm making you a partner," Robert said, handing him papers. "In everything. The workshop, the tools, the business connections. It's not just your business anymore. It's our business. You've earned it." Daniel tried to protest, but Robert wouldn't hear it. "You've given me my life back. This is the least I can do." As winter settled in and the new year approached, the community continued to grow stronger. The Henderson Blackwater program had helped over 30 people find work or services they needed. The town felt more connected, more caring, more aware of the people around them. And at the center of it all were 2 men who'd started as strangers, who'd taken a chance on each other when both were in need, who'd built something beautiful from nothing but faith and hard work and mutual respect. The story people had thought was just about fixing a roof had become something much bigger. It had become a story about fixing hearts, building bridges, and proving that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. Spring arrived with warm weather and new possibilities. Blackwater Home Services had been operating successfully for nearly a year now, and Daniel was managing 3 full-time employees. The business had steady work booked months in advance. The family had moved from their cramped apartment into a small house with a yard where Tommy and Amy could play. But success brought new challenges that Daniel hadn't anticipated. Managing employees was harder than doing the work himself. Scheduling jobs, handling customer complaints, dealing with suppliers who didn't deliver on time. It was overwhelming. One evening, Daniel showed up at Robert's house looking exhausted and frustrated. "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted, slumping into a chair at the kitchen table. "The business part I can handle. It's the people part that's killing me." "Tell me what's happening," Robert said, pouring them both coffee. "One of my guys, he's good at the work, but he shows up late constantly. Customers are complaining. Another guy is fast but sloppy. I have to redo half his work. And the third one is great, but he's talking about leaving to start his own business. I feel like I'm failing." Robert listened quietly, then said, "You're not failing. You're learning. Managing people is the hardest part of any business. You want to know what I learned in 40 years? Please, you can't do everything yourself. You have to trust people even when they disappoint you sometimes. The guy who's late, have you talked to him?" "Really talked to him? I told him he needs to be on time." "That's telling, not talking. Find out why he's late. Maybe he's got problems at home. Maybe he doesn't have reliable transportation. You can't fix a problem if you don't understand it." Daniel nodded slowly. "What about the sloppy one? Does he know his work isn't good enough?" "Sometimes people don't see their own mistakes. Work alongside him for a few days. Show him what quality looks like. If he still doesn't improve, then you have decisions to make, but give him the chance to learn first." "And the guy who wants to leave?" Robert smiled. "Let him go with your blessing. Help him if you can. You remember how it felt when someone helped you? Be that person for him. There's enough work for everyone, and his success doesn't take away from yours." Daniel absorbed this wisdom like he always did. Robert had become more than a friend. He was a mentor, a father figure, the wise voice Daniel consulted before making big decisions. Over the next few weeks, Daniel followed Robert's advice. He discovered the late employee was caring for his sick mother before work and had no one else to help. Daniel adjusted his schedule, letting him start later and work later, Problem solved. The sloppy worker improved dramatically after Daniel spent time showing him the right techniques. Turns out he'd never been properly trained, just thrown into jobs and expected to figure it out. With guidance, he became one of Daniel's most reliable workers. And the employee who wanted to start his own business? Daniel helped him create a business plan, introduced him to suppliers, even loaned him some tools to get started. The young man was so grateful that he referred customers to Daniel whenever he was too busy to take a job himself. You were right, Daniel told Robert, about all of it. The business is running smoother than ever now. You just needed to remember that you're not just managing workers. You're leading people. There's a difference. That spring, something happened that would change everything again. Robert had a heart attack. It was a Saturday morning. Daniel and Tommy were in the workshop building a toy chest for Amy's birthday when Maria came running out to the garage, phone in her hand, face pale. The hospital just called, she said breathlessly. Robert's there. He collapsed at the grocery store. They rushed to the hospital, Daniel's hands shaking on the steering wheel. Robert had become family. More than family. The thought of losing him was unbearable. At the hospital, they found Robert in a bed, looking small and pale, hooked up to monitors and IVs. But he was awake and despite everything managed a weak smile when he saw them. Don't look so worried, he said, his voice raspy. I'm too stubborn to die. What happened? Daniel asked, pulling up a chair beside the bed. Heart attack. Small one, the doctors say. They're keeping me for observation, running tests, talking about procedures and medications. Robert reached out and took Daniel's hand. I need you to do something for me. Anything. There's a folder in my desk at home. Top drawer. It has all my important papers. Will, insurance, everything. If something happens to me. Nothing's going to happen to you, Daniel interrupted. Listen to me. If something happens, I want you to handle things. You're the closest thing to family I have here. My son, he'll come for the funeral. But the day-to-day stuff, I need someone I trust. That's you. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. You're going to be fine. You're going to leave this hospital and come home, and we're going to finish building that toy chest. Robert squeezed his hand. I hope so. But promise me you'll look in that folder. I promise. Robert recovered, but the heart attack was a warning sign. The doctors prescribed medications, recommended lifestyle changes, told him to take it easy. Robert, being Robert, didn't like any of it. I'm not going to spend my remaining years sitting in a chair doing nothing, he grumbled during his first week home. You're not doing nothing, Daniel said, adjusting the pillows behind Robert's back. You're resting. You're healing. There's a difference. I feel useless. You could never be useless. You've touched too many lives, changed too many things. During Robert's recovery, the community showed up in force. Neighbors brought meals. Linda from the diner visited daily. The people Robert had helped through the Henderson Blackwater program came by to check on him, to thank him again, to remind him how much he mattered. Maria essentially moved in, cooking and cleaning and making sure Robert took his medications. Tommy and Amy came by after school every day, doing homework at his kitchen table, telling him about their day, keeping him company. You've got quite a family, the nurse said during one of her home visits. Robert looked around at Daniel's family, at the neighbors coming and going, at all the cards and flowers and well wishes filling his living room. Yeah, he said softly. I really do. One evening, about 3 weeks after the heart attack, Robert called Daniel into his study. He looked serious. I did something, Robert said, and I need to tell you about it. Okay, Daniel said slowly. I updated my will. The house, it's yours. When I'm gone, this house goes to you and your family. Daniel's mouth fell open. Mr. Henderson, I can't accept that. Yes, you can. You will. This house needs a family in it. It needs children's laughter and life and love. That's you. That's Maria and Tommy and Amy. Margaret would approve. She'd love knowing her house went to people who would appreciate it, who would fill it with joy. But your son, my son has his own life, his own house. He'll understand. I'm leaving him other things, don't worry. But this house, it belongs with you. Daniel couldn't speak. He just sat there overwhelmed by the magnitude of the gift. You gave me my life back, Robert continued. You walked into my life when I was drowning in loneliness and grief. You brought your family, your energy, your hope. You reminded me what it means to be alive. This is my way of saying thank you. This is my way of making sure that everything we've built together continues even after I'm gone. "You're not going anywhere," Daniel said firmly. "You're going to be around for years, annoying me with your advice and teaching my kids woodworking and eating Sunday dinners at my table." Robert smiled. "I hope so, but either way the house is yours. That's final." That night, Daniel told Maria about Robert's decision. She cried, overwhelmed by the generosity. "How did we get so lucky?" she whispered. "I don't think it's luck," Daniel said. "I think it's what happens when people choose kindness over fear, when they choose connection over isolation. Robert took a chance on me and it changed everything. Now he's giving us a gift we could never repay." "We'll honor it," Maria said. "We'll fill that house with love and life, just like he wants." Outside, stars filled the Arizona sky. Inside two houses, two families thought about the unexpected bonds that had formed, about the second chances they'd given each other, about the beautiful, complicated, wonderful thing that had grown from one simple decision to hire a hungry man to fix a roof. 2 years had passed since that first morning when Daniel showed up to fix Robert's roof. If someone had told either of them back then where they'd be now, they never would have believed it. Blackwater Home Services had grown beyond anyone's expectations. Daniel now employed 8 people, had 2 work trucks with the company logo painted on the sides, and was getting job offers from 3 counties over. But he'd stayed true to his principles: fair prices, quality work, taking care of the community that had taken care of him. The Henderson Blackwater Community Program had helped over 200 people connect with work or services. It had expanded to include a tool lending library, where people could borrow equipment they couldn't afford to buy. A job training program where experienced workers taught skills to younger people. Even a small fund for emergency help when families hit hard times. Maria had become the full-time coordinator of the program, working from a small office the town provided at the community center. She loved the work, loved helping people the way her family had been helped. Tommy was 8 now, already showing an interest in following his father's footsteps. He could identify every tool in the workshop and knew the difference between good work and sloppy work. Amy was 6, starting 1st grade, and had decided she wanted to be a teacher so she could help kids learn to read. And Robert, now 74, had recovered well from his heart attack. He was more careful now, took his medications faithfully, didn't push himself too hard, but he was still very much involved in everything. Still the wise advisor, the mentor, the grandfather figure to Daniel's kids and several other children in the neighborhood. His house, though he'd willed it to Daniel's family, remained his for now. But it had transformed completely. The loneliness and silence were gone. People were always coming and going. Sunday dinners had become a neighborhood tradition, with different families joining each week. One Saturday in early summer, the community threw a celebration. 2 years since Daniel and Robert's partnership began. 2 years since one act of faith had sparked a transformation throughout the entire town. The park was filled with people, families who'd been helped by the community program, customers who'd hired Blackwater Home Services, neighbors who'd watched the unlikely friendship bloom into something beautiful. The mayor gave a speech, praising Robert and Daniel for showing what community really means. These 2 men could have just completed a business transaction, the mayor said. A roof needed fixing, a man needed work. Job done, everyone moves on. But they chose something more. They chose connection. They chose to see each other as human beings, not just as a means to an end. And look what happened because of that choice. Robert and Daniel stood together, slightly embarrassed by all the attention, but proud too. Proud of what they'd built together. Not just a business, but a movement, a way of being that had changed how people in this town treated each other. After the speeches, after the food and the music and the celebration, Robert and Daniel found a quiet spot under a big oak tree. They sat on a bench watching the community they'd helped strengthen. "You know what I think about sometimes?" Robert said. "What's that?" "What if I'd just waited for one of those expensive roofing companies? What if I hadn't gone back into the diner that day? What if I'd been too scared or too proud to take a chance on someone without credentials?" "I think about that too," Daniel admitted. "What if I'd given up? What if I'd been too proud to sit in that diner looking for work? What if I'd turned down your offer because I didn't think I could do it? We would have both missed out on something incredible." "Yeah, we really would have." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Daniel said, "I have something to tell you. Maria and we've decided to start a scholarship fund for kids from the reservation who want to learn trades. Carpentry, plumbing, electrical work, whatever. We're calling it the Henderson Scholarship Fund. Robert's eyes filled with tears. Daniel, you don't have to do that. Yes, we do. You invested in me when I had nothing. You gave me the tools, literally and figuratively, to build a life. Now we want to do that for others. We want kids to have the opportunities I didn't have growing up. We want them to know that one person believing in them can change everything. That means more to me than you know. I know exactly how much it means, because you did it for me. As the sun started to set, families began heading home. Tommy and Amy ran over, faces sticky with cotton candy, eyes bright with excitement. Can we go get ice cream? Tommy asked. We just had cake and candy, Daniel said, but it's a celebration. Amy protested. Robert laughed. The kids have a point. It is a celebration. Let's go get ice cream. They all piled into Daniel's truck, the one with the Blackwater Home Services logo on the side. As they drove through town, people waved. Everyone knew the truck. Everyone knew the story behind it. At the ice cream shop, they ran into Linda from the diner. There's my favorite people, she said, giving Robert a hug. How you feeling? Never better, Robert said. And it was true. Despite the heart attack, despite being 74, despite all the years of loss and grief, he felt better than he had in decades. They got their ice cream and sat outside at the picnic tables. Tommy told elaborate stories about the games he'd played at the celebration. Amy showed off the drawing she'd made, a picture of their family, including Robert, all holding hands. That's beautiful, sweetheart, Maria said, admiring the picture. That's all of us, Amy explained. Our family. Robert looked at the drawing, at himself included right in the middle, and felt his heart swell. Family. Not by blood, but by choice. By love. By the bonds formed through struggle and triumph and simple everyday moments like eating ice cream on a summer evening. Later that night, after Daniel's family had gone home, Robert sat in his living room with Margaret's journal. He did this sometimes, reading her words, feeling her presence. He turned to the last page, the one she'd written shortly before she died. The one about hoping he'd find purpose and connection again. He pulled out a pen and for the first time wrote his own entry below hers. You were right, Margaret, about everything. I did find purpose again. I found connection and love and family. I found a reason to wake up every morning. A young man named Daniel knocked on my door looking for work, and he gave me back my life. He gave me grandchildren to love. He gave me a business to build. He gave me a community to serve. He gave me hope. I miss you every single day. But I'm not lonely anymore. I'm not just surviving. I'm living. Really living. And I know you'd be happy about that. You'd love Daniel and Maria. You'd spoil Tommy and Amy. You'd be so proud of what we've all built together. Thank you for the years we had. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for teaching me that the best way to honor your memory is to live fully, love deeply, and help others find their way. I'll see you again someday, but until then, I'm going to keep living the life you wanted for me. He closed the journal and looked around his living room. Photos of Daniel's family mixed with photos of his own. Drawings from the kids on the refrigerator. A calendar on the wall marked with upcoming dinners and gatherings and plans. This was what life was supposed to be. Not perfect, but full. Not without pain, but not defined by it either. Full of people who cared about each other. Full of second chances and new beginnings and proof that it's never too late to change your story. Robert Henderson had hired a hungry man to fix his roof. That simple decision, born from desperation and hope, had changed everything. It had saved Daniel's family from poverty. It had pulled Robert from grief and loneliness. It had inspired a community to see each other differently, to help each other more freely, to remember that we're all connected. The roof had been fixed long ago. But what they'd built together, the friendship and the business and the community program and the family bonds, that would last for generations. Sometimes the best things in life start with the smallest acts of faith. A chance taken, a hand extended, a door opened. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, those small acts grow into something beautiful and unexpected and transformative. Robert turned off the lights and headed to bed, smiling. Tomorrow was Sunday. Daniel's family would come for dinner. Tommy would want to work in the workshop. Amy would help him in the garden. Maria would cook something delicious, and they'd all sit around the table together, sharing food and stories and love. It was a simple life. A good life, the kind of life worth living. And it had all started with a leaky roof and two men who needed each other, even though neither of them knew it at the time. The end.